Here to cover all things crime, history, and politics, we are at the desk. I'm your host, Gracie Polovich, and in tonight's episode, we will be talking about New York City's mayoral race, the history of the Penn State Thespian Society, and the divide concerning the O.J. Simpson case. Now, come take a seat with us at the desk.
En esta cámara.
Sí, todos los cámaras van a cambiar. Tiene que buscar.
Welcome back to ATD. First, time to send it over to the politics panel to discuss New York City's mayoral election and what has drawn so many eyes to frontrunner Zohran Mamdani. Over to you, Vida.
Thank you, Gracie. On November 2nd, New York City will decide who their future mayor is. This past Thursday, candidates Andrew Cuomo, Curtis Sliwa, and Zohran Mamdani publicly debated, with Mamdani still leading, publicly condemning President Trump, his opponents, and widely celebrated by many Democrats. Mamdani is determined to set himself apart and strengthen the Democratic Party more than ever. Tonight, we're diving into who Zohran Mamdani is, what's driving his campaign, and why so many voters are paying attention. So, Jackson, what does he represent for Democrats, and why are people paying attention?
He represents a new voice. I feel like in this last election, they stuck to the very traditional Democrat, Barack Obama era Democratic Party, where it was very, I guess the word would be neoliberal. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, those former Democrats, Gavin Newsom. He represents the Bernie Sanders AOC faction, like Democratic Socialism. Right. So people are kind of going into this because they want somebody who can win an election, because Democrats lost so much last year. So they see him as something new, a new form of policy, a new, more progressive form of policy. And that's why people want to see him win, so that way they can kind of test this out, because this hasn't really been tested in America in a long time, I feel like.
Yeah.
See, like with Mamdani, is that he really represents, he's focused on policy. He talks a lot in the debates how he is focused on policy. He's focused on housing, childcare, things of that sort. And what I think Democrats really like about him is that he delivers a message extraordinarily well. And he's personable, and he's nice to talk to, and he's good on camera. And he really represents a lot of what you would want to see from a young, aspiring politician, especially someone as progressive as he is.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into the policy in a couple of minutes, but when we talk about it off of all of your points, we have Chuck Schumer, we have this older generation, we just had Joe Biden as president, and the age, I think people are just starting to realize they want new voices, like you were saying. Is this the right voice for the Democratic Party? We'll get into.
So I don't really know where to start with this, but there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, I would say if we were to define who the real Democrat in the race is when it comes to policy, it's probably Cuomo.
It is.
But speaking of a lead, we're talking about a 15, 20-point difference if Sliwa stays in the race. So at the very moment, Mamdani is comfortable. He was probably the most professional in the debate. He had some questionable answers, like obviously saying FDR is the current president. Not necessarily true. He's more of a thing of the past at the moment, but I guess Curtis Sliwa covered that one up with his answer. But we're going to go into the policy and everything like that. But when we have something as far as the far right, which we're seeing a lot right now in Donald Trump's government, I'm not saying Donald Trump directly is a far right kind of guy, but I'm saying his government has been far right in a lot of issues. When we see something like that, the people do tend to turn very far left. That's kind of what we have right now with Zohran Mamdani. His popularity is skyrocketing when it comes to the youth vote and our population. But New York is currently saying right now that a majority of the population is people who don't know who they're voting for right now are over the age of 50, and Cuomo is climbing. So Zohran should not be too comfortable, but he does have a comfortable lead, and it makes sense how he got there.
And I don't think Sliwa dropping out would really hurt Mamdani's chances all that much.
I 100% disagree with that.
You think so?
All the polling is saying it'd be a much closer race.
All of those votes.
That's a
he
fact-based.
did not have many supporters to even begin with Sliwa. Him dropping out I honestly think would lead to more people not voting at all rather than flipping to Cuomo.
Okay.
Well, let's get into the policies a little bit. You kind of touched on that. Why don't you expand on your thoughts on his policies and kind of how that's fueling his support?
Yeah, I mean, he's labeled as a democratic socialist, which is not really someone who's a Democrat. It's really just they're socialists and you smack on the name Democrat along with it.
Well, if you believe in democracy, you could be a Democrat.
Right, but when you talk about conventionalist Democratic candidates, they don't usually have many socialist views like Bernie and AOC. But when you look at it, a lot of the stuff, he has good ideas. In a perfect society, yes, we want to ride a free bus. Yes, we want free healthcare. Yes, we want our rent to be frozen and to not be paying out the wazoo. With that being said, then you look at it, well, who's paying for all this? You just don't live in a free society. And that's when we get to the point of him wanting to tax the rich.
So you think it's unrealistic?
It is very unrealistic because it's not the New York that we're accustomed to. It's the financial district is not what it used to be. Commercial with brick and mortar stores aren't like they used to be when people are rushing to the store. They don't need that. Big companies don't need that. And you see it just from this right here. You have Palm Beach County in Florida who's capitalizing on this, putting out things in Times Square, a bunch of commercials telling everyone to move there because there is no tax there.
That's been going on for a long time, though.
But this is the biggest capitalized.
Way before Zohran Mamdani, that's been going on. People have been trying to chip at New Yorkers for a long time.
But this is the perfect opportunity.
If you look at the amount of people who have moved south during COVID, that's what we're talking about, a big movement, probably more than Mamdani, because the truth is that it takes a long time for these companies to just pick up shop. You can't just tomorrow wake up and be in Florida and run your whole company from there. We're seeing companies like I'm trying to think of like a solid example. Scripps, for example, has a lot of offices in New York. They were talking about moving down to Florida. Fox News was talking about moving half their shows down to Florida. It's very progressive. NBC News was talking about moving, obviously to DC, it's a little different. You have to progressively get out of New York, and it's very difficult, one. And two, the truth of the matter is that most of the taxes go through Albany. They go through New York State. They go through the governor's office. So people saying they're moving out is kind of more of a threat. I just don't see that many people moving out of New York if Mamdani wins, to the extent that is being said. People will move out, not to the extent that's being said.
And that's fair, but I will make this point, which you just did, where taxes come from. That his ideas that he can just raise some of these taxes, a lot of his ideas have to go through the state. And with that, Governor Kathy Hochul, who is up for re-election, but she has mentioned that she has no plan on taxing the rich. So a lot of his ideas, and especially we know Trump is going to not give him any federal aid. Where's this money coming from? He can't do it.
She also didn't give him a very strong endorsement, and she was actually given her position after Cuomo dropped out. So it's a very interesting election for her in New York City, and they can't really tell her where she should lean on in her campaign, because New York City is almost half of the population of New York State. So in that case scenario, if she wants to win her election, she's going to have to be very smart with how voters lead in New York City.
I will say that Hochul has shown more of a willingness lately to work with Mamdani. She said she was willing to work with him on universal child care, which I think can only be a net positive for New York and really anywhere.
Well, I mean, I think ultimately, before we change to a different subject, it's undeniable that his kind of tumultuous relationship with President Donald Trump is, if he is elected as mayor, is going to be definitely a roadblock, possibly in making sure that his policies go ahead. But yeah, transitioning our conversation to recent news on Colombia's President Gustavo Petro. He recently accused President Trump of murder after a boat strike in the Caribbean that the American authorities claimed was carrying illicit drugs, and it killed a fisherman. The president responded with roughly $4 million cut in aid given to Colombia. This is part of a process that has unfolding with a lot of Latin American leaders. So essentially, was this justified, and how are diplomatic relations with Latino or Latin American leaders changing right now?
I mean, the problem is, I think it's a lack of evidence. You can say you're striking drug boats or boats that are filled with drugs off the coast, but if you're not providing any evidence for there being such, it's going to be pretty hard to trust the Trump administration on this. Not saying that I trust Petro at all in this situation either, but I would not be surprised if, like he said, there was a murder as a result of some of these strikes. Now, there is obviously a drug problem with Colombia. They produce 2/3 of all the cocaine in the entire world. So if Trump really wants to combat that, I can see why he's taking such a hard line with Colombia right now. But I think a lot of it is less than really about the drugs and more so about Petro's comments towards Trump.
Right. I think, he's definitely retaliating against Petro's very strong stance against Trump. And we've seen kind of how Trump has sided with certain Latin American leaders that have, we can look at Milei, Argentina's president, who is kind of on the same war on woke with Trump, and Trump is very much allied with him. But then other presidents that are taking a stronger stance they're getting the butt of it. So I think it's definitely speaking to a larger issue of who's allied with Trump and who isn't.
Yeah. Well, President Petro, he claims to be fighting this war on cocaine, fighting this war on crime in general, but the results aren't really coming in. Like Ryan said, cocaine is still mainly produced out of Colombia. They make so much of it, and it's only getting higher each year, and it's killing a lot of people, obviously. So Trump is taking the stand because he doesn't want cocaine coming into the U.S., and he also doesn't want cocaine going to other countries as well. That being said, I think he's willing to ally with people who get along with him. That's just kind of how world politics work. You ally people who ally with your views, and you don't ally with people who don't, generally speaking. And obviously, you have El Salvador's President Bukele, who is going to really ally with Trump on the anti-crime, anti-cartel, very much heavy police state. So he'll get along with those people, and he won't get along with Petro because he's not doing what Trump wants him to do. It's pretty much how it goes with this.
Let's be very clear about this. The president of Colombia with also the president of Venezuela are not good people, and they're murderers. You can say what you want about these operations, but what they let go on and what they have in their countries, they have bigger problems than Trump at the moment. And you look at it, and I just mentioned Venezuela, and I would like to bring it up because they're another key player. They're starting to play with fire with us as they're starting to bring in some Russian air defense and starting to do that. So I suggest to them very nicely that they start calming down, because it will not end up good for them if they keep kind of teetering the line of our friendship.
So is the halt of aid, sorry to interrupt you, is the halt of aid justified?
I think it is. We're talking about, we're trying to crack
$400 million.
But what are they doing for us is my question when it comes
to strongest military ally in the area, especially if we with our issues with Venezuela lately, them not teaming up, but sort of kind of being in cahoots with each other now that they're both both have a bone to pick with us, could spell trouble for us in the region.
You're not wrong, but we have the capability of sending cruise missiles deep into Venezuela without even entering their territory, and also just moving into the other Latin America countries. And these people, we have to be very clear, they're allowing these drug issues to occur. And I get it that we're cut, and we could say they're helpful in some cases, but this drug problem has never been bigger in this country, I would argue. And having these drugs come in illegally, and it's killing people all over the world. And someone
who's consuming the drugs?
As in, I
think we should think about how we're keeping this drug problem fueling. Clearly there's a lot of Americans that are consuming this drug. Shouldn't that be addressed first?
Well, I think you need to get to the root cause of it. Where is it coming from?
I think two things could be true. There's a demand.
Yeah, there's nuance here.
There's no consumption. There's going to be no
consumption and production should both be cut out. We should focus here in America on drug use prevention, especially cocaine and deadly drugs like that. But we should also stop the production as much as we can, because if it's not there, people can't use it.
Right.
We're not really doing our part in our country either. The war on drugs is considered to be a massive failure. And as far as I know, no steps are being taken right now to curb the drug problem currently in the United States, aside from targeting Colombia.
To your point, non-for-profits, a lot of which targeted drugs. This was a good point that I saw in a New York Times op-ed. A lot of non-for-profit organizations that advertise about drugs have actually gotten cut funds from Donald Trump's administration. They've lost a lot of federal funds, and they're key to advertising the dangers of tobacco, fentanyl, you name it.
I just think off of what your question, and Jackson's right, if you have to cut it at the cause, I know what you're saying, supply and demand, but if there is no supply, there will be no demand because you can't get it. And we need to cut that off. making the world's largest producer of cocaine, that's outrageous. That is something that's basically a toxin that kills people.
And to the military, we don't need them down there. Like, it's nice to have them, but they're not as necessary as allies such as our European allies, Japan. Right. We can easily handle those types of countries.
We've seen what happens when we pull out. We've seen what happens when we pull out of countries like that.
Yes, but I'm saying right now, I'm not seeing that threat as of right now. Back in the day, maybe so, but I'm saying right now in 2025, I'm not saying it's a necessity. I don't think it's going to have long-term effects. I think that eventually Petro and Trump will get along. I think this will be a temporary feud. He'll put on a terror threat, he'll do what he's been doing. But this won't be a long-term thing. We won't be talking about this in 5 years.
So how do we foresee Trump's relationships with other Latin American leaders changing or possibly staying the same? Do we see any reconciliation? I mean, I know you just mentioned that.
I think it depends on who you're talking about, because when we're talking about down there, we're talking about half of them. He's a huge fan. Javier Milei loves Javier Milei. Nayib Bukele loves Nayib Bukele. He uses Nayib Bukele's prisons technically. So I think it really depends on who you're talking about.
Yeah, and to the point of, it could be dangerous if we don't have people there in our militaries and with our relations. Venezuela has been claiming that they have over 8 million members of militia in their military, but reports have come out that a lot of them seem to be older folks and that they're actually not very capable of doing the damage that they claim to be doing with these Russian weapons and things like that. So when it comes to that, I really have no concern that in the case that they want to pick a fight with the United States of America, that we will be able to handle them very well. And when you look at those two countries, and specifically Venezuela, majority of their country is living under the poverty line. They're trying to escape because Maduro lets gangs just run basically most of the towns, and he arrests all of his political adversaries. I mean, that is just like continuous crime after crime after crime. Why should we be partners with a country that does that, especially also with making and having the ability to sell cocaine?
We are no strangers to partnering with countries that commit crimes of that scale.
You're not wrong, but for that case, we have no need to be partners with them at this very moment.
So we're ultimately going to be probably seeing an increase in strikes on boats and other, obviously, migrants that are coming to and forth with the assumption that they are traveling with narcotics.
Be careful when you're fishing.
Yes.
Essentially, does the means justify the end? If we're trying to block these drugs coming in, is it worth having these possibly innocent lives dead?
I mean, there's just so much we don't know in relation to these strikes. We only know what Pete Hegseth tells us. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't really trust everything that Pete Hegseth tells us.
Right. And I mean, legal specialists have called these killings illegal, but there hasn't really been anything coming out of the White House that, expresses any sort of regret or says anything against
diversionary war is a very big thing with the Republican Party. If we want to go down that road, diversionary war is a very big thing with the Republican Party. After something like 9/11 happens under Bush's watch, you know how the U.S. is going to respond? It's going to declare war on who? In that case, terror. In this case, Donald Trump, very frustrated with the whole Jeffrey Epstein situation and government being shut down. How do we kind of like shade that from the news? We declare war down south.
Yeah,
diversionary war. It's a key Republican tactic, and it's also I'm not siding necessarily with the left on this case scenario, but we do see a Donald Trump-like government like to change the topic very quickly on the news. They understand the 24-hour news cycle. To their credit, in that case scenario, right after the Epstein news came out, guess what was happening? Troops were in D.C. even though crime was down. It's a very popular thing with the Republican Party. It's not really a new tool in the kit.
And mind you, this was supposed to be the presidency of peace.
Right.
This is what he ran on. He ran on peace presidency, no more foreign wars. And every day we are striking Venezuela.
Shout out to his effort in Israel-Palestine. Obviously didn't fall through, but shout out to his effort on that one.
And lastly, we can close it out with the fact of the matter is you guys are right that if we're going to claim that, which there's a war on drugs in this country and worldwide, we can't just be striking and punishing these countries. We also have to be doing our part within our country.
And you're absolutely right that cocaine is a problem and drugs is a problem, even on a down year. You're absolutely right. Love this. We all get along very good. We are an example of politics.
Okay, that is all the time that we have left for the politics panel. We will all be following the race and the Trump administration's developing relationships with world leaders. See you next week. Back to you, Gracie.
Thanks, Vida. Now, let's turn it over to Janae Overton to talk all things Thespian Society.
3.
Thanks, Gracie. The Penn State Thespian Society was founded in 1897 by Professors Fred Lewis Petit, the lyricist of our very own alma mater, and John H. Leach, and has existed from the beginning as a student-run organization devoted to the performing arts, producing quality performances every year by its member students. Interestingly enough, Dr. Petit was the head of the Department of English, and Dr. Leach was a professor of mathematics. Neither had roots in theater, yet both came together to form Thespians. This tradition continues today, as many members are not actively pursuing degrees or careers in theater. It continues as the longest continuously running organization on campus, now in its 128th year. Since 1919, Thespians has put on one large-scale production a semester, which has been put on in their home theater at the Schwab Auditorium since it opened in 1903. The first Thespians meeting was called to order on October 22nd, 1897. At this meeting, the club acquired its name, Thespians, suggested by Leach. The officers were elected, and the first show was selected. The Rivals was Thespians' first performance, held in the college chapel of the original Old Main on February 14, 1898. The scenery was borrowed from the Garment Opera House in Bellefonte, and the costumes were rented from a company in Philadelphia. The show was performed at the Garment Opera House a few days later, partially to facilitate the return of the scenery. Although a play may seem out of place in the club now, musicals were not regularly performed by Thespians until 1912. In 1898, when the Thespians performed their first production, there were only 3 women in the college. Women did not perform in any Thespian show until World War I, when a shortage of men forced the club to cast women. And since 1919, then women have been in every show and allowed to finally be members in 1953. In the interim, women formed their own sister club, the Masquerades, which ran from 1934 to 1953. Since 2002, the Thespian Society was partnered with the Center County AIDS Resource to put out their annual charity cabaret, Masquerades, to raise thousands of dollars each year to help provide and educate resources to those that need it. On top of this, the Thespian Society has been a proud Thon organization for over 20 years and are honored to raise money in support of the illicities and to fight childhood cancer. Penn State Thespians are honored to have such a distinguished alum as Gene Kelly, Julius Epstein, and Edward Binns, as well as Donald Taylor, and look forward to the continued years of excellence on and off the stage. Over to you, Shay.
Thanks, Gracie. In 1994, former NFL running back O.J. Simpson became the main suspect in the murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ronald Goldman. Despite DNA evidence linking him to the crime, Simpson was acquitted of all charges in 1995 due to concerns with the police's handling of evidence. His 8-month trial became a topic of national conversation, addressing domestic violence, DNA evidence, and police misconduct. This televised trial caused a divide between Americans. Last season, we took a deeper dive into this case, and today we revisit this divide with a debate between panelist Ginevra Semprini arguing for Simpson's guilt and panelist Kara Howard arguing against it. Kara, let's start with you.
Yes. Hello. It is nice to be here, Jenny. Welcome to the crime panel. We're very happy to have and Shay as well.
I know.
We have new faces. This is super exciting. So obviously, Shay, as you have said and we have said, this is a case that we have already visited. However, for our topic today, we kind of wanted to revisit it. I know that you and I were talking kind of over this past weekend about a lot of the controversy that surrounds this case, even now, kind of to this day. And so obviously, we're just going to state the obvious here. You know, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty, even after all the evidence in the trial and everything, you know, even after, you know, 2 deaths, and after being guilty in the name of civil court, he was found innocent in the name of criminal court. So I'm in a criminal court. So that's kind of, I'm not gonna lie, biggest piece of evidence right there is he was found not guilty. So what do you have to say, Ginny, to the American court system and the American people who said that he was innocent?
Well,
you have a different opinion.
Yeah, you do make a very good point.
Yeah.
In criminal court, he was found innocent.
Yeah.
But if we just relook at everything from the evidence that was found, from his history, his issues that he had with his wife, there's been history of abuse.
Yes.
He was overly protective over Nicole. So, just everything leading up to it, what the family and friends around them say about this case, it just goes to show how guilty he can be.
It goes to show how guilty he could be, though, not how guilty he actually was, because, again, as we're revisiting the name of criminal court, he was found innocent. And yes, if unfortunately there were those issues with domestic abuse and domestic violence and things like that. However, if you really look at, O.J. Simpson and Nicole, what exactly would he have to gain from her murder? He was a famous star football player. He's living in a very nice place in Brentwood, California. Truly, if he were to kill his wife out of, anger or jealousy or something like that, all that does is just put him at risk of being arrested. It's not like there was any type of true financial gain. There was gain, they were already divorced. So, sure, she had another partner. But there was no type of cheating or adultery. So realistically, what would he have to gain from her murder?
Well, realistically, I do think the murder happened out of aggression and out of emotion. He was very controlling of her during and out of the relationship. Even after they divorced, family and friends have also said this on part of OJ's side and as well as Nicole's side. So, I definitely do think that him seeing her with, different men after their divorce definitely sparked something in him to do this.
The only thing is that, with kind of saying it could be kind of out of aggression and out of emotion, I will admit that is an interesting fact, and obviously kind of during what led to after the crime scene about, the chase in his car, and there was reports he was threatening to kill himself, he was suicidal and everything like that. That emotion is obviously shown. However, people kind of were saying, and OJ himself was saying, that he was so distraught over the news of the murder of his ex-wife that led him to be suicidal, not that him potentially murdering his wife is what led him to be suicidal. So are you saying that OJ's claims of his own emotion are incorrect?
Yeah, in a way, I definitely do think that his behavior was to cover up most of what he did. He did have a dream team of lawyers. He did have very good lawyers by his side that did state that he got framed. So I definitely think that his lawyers, his fame did play a big part in the role of him getting found innocent.
But you just said that his lawyers himself had kind of admitted that OJ had gotten framed. So therefore, he's not actually guilty if he was framed for a murder he didn't commit.
He does have really good lawyers. So they brought up the fact that he was framed in a way to cover up what he did. So I think, having these really good lawyers by your side and paying this much money, definitely, and the fame he had, obviously no one is going to find, a famous star guilty. No one wants to see a famous star being guilty because he murdered his wife. So I definitely think, his fame, the public also probably a little bit was on his side because, you never want to see someone you maybe look up to go to jail for that reason.
Yeah. And I do agree that a certain type of kind of celebrity status, there's obviously a lot of privilege that comes with kind of being in, that kind of area of society. However, there are stars, there are celebrities, singers, rappers, sports players who are, convicted of crimes all the time, going to jail. You have famously Diddy, obviously just spent his time in jail for his crimes. You have Chris Brown for more abuse and domestic violence. So we have a history of, obviously serving true justice and sending people to jail. And that in this case, justice was served because he was found not guilty for his actions. So just because he was a celebrity doesn't mean that he got out of, being accused of guilty. It's just simply because of the lack of evidence and the mishandling and misuse of this evidence from the police department is part of the reason why he's not guilty, because they mistreated him all throughout this trial. And if you look at the timeline of events, I mean, honestly, it really doesn't make any sense if he would actually commit this murder, which he claims that he didn't and which a jury believed because they proved him innocent.
Well, yeah, I definitely think his fame isn't the only thing that played part in why he got found not guilty. But the evidence was there. I mean, the DNA in the blood found at the crime scene, it was his. The blood found in his car was his ex-wife's, Nicole's. So
the car that they shared, though, is not just his car. They shared the car.
But, the glove that got found on scene.
Yes, the glove. We're gonna talk about the glove.
The glove,
yeah.
The famous glove that didn't fit. You know, he did have a latex glove under it, so obviously his hand could squeeze into the glove that was found at the scene. So, I just think it was a mix of things that went into it. Obviously, he had one of the most famous lawyers next to his side, so who wouldn't believe such a good lawyer, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, personally, though, if I was in his position and I, had that nice of a life, that much fame and that much money, and I was getting accused of a crime that I didn't commit, that I was, potentially framed for, as we just discussed, I would also pay a big portion of that NFL money to have a good legal team if I was, trying to be convicted of something that I didn't do. And then, so talking about the glove, I've read so much about this glove, and one of the biggest things is, as you said, he was wearing a latex glove underneath it. People claim that he kind of contorted his hand like this, kind of, in a way, so that way it didn't really fit. And I mean, whether it fit, whether it didn't, I do understand that there was a left glove that was found at the crime scene, and the right glove was found in O.J. Simpson's home. However, these gloves, I researched it before, it's Eris, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, extra large light gloves. They're made out of leather. That company manufactured gloves for over 100 years. How many how many of those gloves, you have any idea how many of those gloves are out in the world right now?
So many.
Exactly.
Probably.
So just because so coincidentally one was at the crime scene and one was in his home, how much water does that really hold?
Well, you're right. Very, very good point. Yeah. But what are the odds that one was found at the crime scene that he committed and one was found in his home? Who else would have that glove? Though, yeah,
his
ex-wife
could
so
have.
many. Yes, but there can be so many, but there's just the odds of it is just very slim.
I mean, potentially, but I don't think it's really preposterous to say that his ex-wife possibly had some of his belongings, especially since, they did keep in contact with each other. And I mean, they both shared a car under his name, and maybe it could have been Ronald Goldman's glove. I mean, we don't know that.
Yeah,
I mean, men's gloves, leather gloves made in the 90s. I mean, every man had a pair of those. So I just feel like, obviously, it is a coincidence. However, coincidences do occur. And as you said, his blood was found at the scene of the crime. And I know that there were scratches that were left on his left hand, I believe, after the murder took place, but they were never confirmed to be defensive wounds. So they truly could have been from anything.
Yes.
And it was not described whether it was a gash or a stab, or it could have been a paper cut. So, I mean, they weren't confirmed to be defensive wounds. I feel like it doesn't hold that much water.
Yeah, I definitely don't think the wounds, count as much towards evidence in this story.
Yeah.
But the fact that his blood was found at the crime scene was one in several billion chances. So that is just such a big part of the evidence. Why else would his DNA be there?
Yeah.
Other than him being there. And also his story when he was talking in court and when he was saying what he was doing that day and where he was during the crime scene, during the crime that happened, his story did not add up at all. He did many different he made up many different stories in a way. And so, yeah, his story just did not add up. The evidence, his history as well. Nicole did have to call the police in the past for his domestic violence. So, having a person that has history with this, I wouldn't be surprised that they murdered their wife.
I suppose I wouldn't be surprised as well. However, the main story not adding up, that is one thing, obviously. Yes, it could be lying. It could also just be a difficulty to recount certain details, especially during a traumatic time like this. I understand they were divorced, but it's still his ex-wife. It's someone he was, in a relationship with, who he loved and cared for. So that potentially could be lying, potentially could just be, a little bit of an accidental slip. But the blood found at the crime scene, it matched OJ's blood type. And that type of blood, 0.5% of the population could also match. I did the math. That's about 4 billion people who that potentially could have matched. Because obviously this was like kind of back in the late 90s. We don't have the same technology we have today. So the blood at the crime scene matched OJ's blood type. It was not his genuine sample of blood. So it could have been OJ Simpson's blood, but it also could have been 4 billion other people's blood type as well.
I mean,
living in an overpopulated area in California, I mean that, that kind of makes a little bit of sense.
I mean, I definitely think like this could definitely be a reason, but also the odds of it or the coincidences, like there's too many in just one story to make it just seem like, oh yeah, these are all just coincidences. I don't think so. Like, really, honestly, he probably did play a part in the murdering of his wife. I also want to go back to he was found guilty in the civil court.
Yeah.
When they revised it, he was finally found guilty. So I think that after with better technology,
guilty in 2 different accounts, though.
Absolutely. And let's just hear one more closing comment from you, Kara.
Okay. Wait, I was gonna say it's guilty. It's guilty in 2 different accounts, though, because the rules and regulations for criminal and civil court, what you need to be either deemed guilty or not guilty, are set to 2 completely different parameters, and they actually have no correlation at all. So just because you are found guilty of something in civil court truly has no correlation over into criminal court. So that is one thing, though.
Very true.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. And that's all the time we have for today. The Simpson case continues to be relevant today for highlighting the role of the media and the justice system. And that's all from the crime panel today. Back to you, Gracie.
Thank you, Shay. Sadly, that is all the time we have for today. In the meantime, stay updated with ATG on all our socials at PSU at the desk. And let us know what you want to see us cover next. I'm Gracie Polovich, and we will see you back at the desk next week.